Good evening, everyone. It looks like that is the counter stopping of everybody arriving. So welcome everybody to the COVID-19 Safety Coordinator update. For those of you who don't know me or haven't heard from me, you maybe already have. You probably already have actually from the webinars that we've had. But my name's Steve Turnbull. I am the Caledonian Midlands Regional Director, and I've been leading these webinars for the COVID-19 Safety Coordinator over the last couple of months. So welcome to you all. For tonight, we have got a webinar where we'll be kind of reiterating some key messages from where we are within stage 3 of the Return to Rugby webinar, and we'll just be kind of sharing some key details and key updates as we go through. So the webinar itself will last about 40 to 45 minutes. As always, all our webinars are being recorded, and once we finish this webinar, it will be edited and will be available through the YouTube link, which we'll send out to all coordinators. As well as that, the slides will be available, and we'll also send out the slides as we always do. Again, if you have attended our webinars previously, you will know that there's a Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. So please do take the opportunity, if you've got questions as we go, to input some questions into that Q&A function. We'll try and answer some live as we go through with typed response, but what we will do with the questions, we will download them all and update the questions into a FAQs document which we have on the website, and we've also started to share that every week or so to the safety coordinators too, just to keep that relevant and fresh. So please continue to ask your questions. Agenda tonight. So for the first part, I'll just take us through a bit of a Return to Rugby update, and again, just reiterate some key messages and just look at a couple of new processes and guidance we have been developing. We've then got Alan Clisby from Hamilton Rugby Club, so it's always much better to not hear from us for the entire webinar, and it's great to have Alan as Hamilton Rugby Club Safety Coordinator on tonight, and he's going to share a bit of good practice and the processes that he's been going through with the rugby club at Hamilton, and it'll be great to hear practically what it has been like from a safety coordinator. So that should be really useful, and we thank Alan for accepting an invitation to do that. Then for the third part of the evening, we'll pass over to Jen Griffin, and Jen will just give us a bit of an update and reiterate some facility reopening guidelines. And then that will finish us off with some final messages, and that will be finished off for the webinar for this evening. So in terms of Return to Rugby update, first of all, just really want to take the opportunity to really just refresh some key messages and reiterate some key messages. We're probably all aware over the last week or so, there's been a spike of COVID cases up in Aberdeen. And it's really just to take this opportunity to remind ourselves that it's certainly not gone away, and we need to keep adhering to the guidelines. That is not us telling you, because we know that you are all living and breathing this probably on a daily basis. I suppose it's just a bit of a reminder for you to continue to remind the club, your club members, your players and your coaches of the guidelines, of the procedures when they are attending training. Because we are at a stage where with this pandemic where we still need to progress with extreme caution. That's still necessary. So it's just kind of want to take this opportunity to remind you to keep that communication going with your clubs, particularly the facts which we've got on the right hand side here, as a message which will hopefully be present within your club when people come to training or to visit your club on a daily basis, that we're seeing these messages kind of loud and clear, and it's just reminding everybody that we need to keep adhering to these guidance. As well as that, the first webinar that we held, if you've seen that or attended that, we talked a wee bit about how COVID-19 and your role within the clubs as safety coordinators should really be embedded within the club governance. And what we really mean by that is that it's embedded within the committee. It's really supported by the club committee or by the management board or the management structure of the trustees. It's part of regular committee meetings or you have a sub-COVID committee set up, which I'm aware that some clubs do as well. And again, that just keeps it on the radar at all times. As I say, I know it is with all of you, because you will be living and breathing it, but it's just to continue to push those messages out within your own environments is as important as it is. Just a few updates. So I kind of touched on this, and I'll talk a wee bit about some processes that we've been developing around local lockdowns in a few slides' time. But as we all know, there has been a spike up in Aberdeen City Local Authority, which has meant that there is a local lockdown there. And all clubs have been notified to that, and I will talk a wee bit about what the process off the back of this that we've developed to support local lockdowns and to support clubs in areas if that happens. And I think it's probably just quite a clear message to all of us that it is still present, and this may happen again in different areas across the country as we progress forward. The e-learning course, which we launched a couple of weeks ago, is now had 4,800 completions, which is a fantastic number, really, really great number, and just a really good representation of the buy-in from everybody across our game who have taken the time to complete that. There was, I think for the first few days, we were getting quite a lot of feedback about a bit of a glitch in the system, and certificates of people who completed it weren't getting sent. So that has been fixed, and I believe now that emails have been sent out to everybody who's completed that course with the certificate, so it has that proof of completion. But we've got a fantastic number within there. There's been great buy-in across our community. So again, it might be worth just communicating that again to your club if anybody's not yet completed it. To go on it. I think it takes about 15 minutes to complete, so it's not terribly onerous, but a good course, and obviously quite an essential course to complete as well. In terms of return to rugby competition, so the adult and the youth, and that's male and female across both adult and youth, competition formats are being developed at the moment as we speak. Certainly from my point of view, I've been leading the youth restructuring the revised structure for next season, and that we held a webinar last Tuesday, and we'll hopefully have opportunity to communicate the structure at the end of this month. Again, the adult season structure for next season has been going through consultation with the clubs, and again has been developed over the course of this month. So again, hopefully we will have more to share on that in the next few weeks. We've been getting a lot of inquiries about mini rugby, a lot of questions coming in about mini rugby guidance and what we can and can't do within mini rugby. So just to take this opportunity just to share that we're working on some specific guidance for mini rugby, because we are getting some inquiries now about can we hold mini rugby matches, club v club. And the answer to that at the moment is no, but we are going to be producing some guidance particularly for and specifically for mini rugby, which will follow in due course as well. And then another piece of work that we're also working on, now this might be a wee while away yet, but we want to get ahead of the game, and I know Jen's particularly is leading on this piece of work, but we're going to be producing some matchday guidance for clubs and for schools in preparation for the competitive season. So again, we're a wee while away from that yet, but hopefully in the next wee while we'll be able to share what that looks like. But again, that will be another good piece of resource that you'll be able to use to provide you with some guidance around matchday when we get to that opportunity. And then finally, as you can see, we're working on a few different pieces of items at the moment. We are getting a lot of inquiries about pitchside care and first aid guidance. At the moment, the British Medical Journal is the go-to, so we're signposting everybody who's asking about pitchside care and first aid advice to the British Medical Journal, and there's some really good resource in there, and that is the go-to for advice and guidance. But at the same time, when we do transition into stage 4, of the Return to Rugby roadmap that will be accompanied by some specific first aid guidance for clubs and schools as well. So these are the kind of things that we're working on, which will start to come to fruition in the next couple of weeks. So in terms of the Return to Rugby roadmap timeline, I'm sure we've all seen and are all very familiar with the roadmap itself and the detail that's in there. Just as a bit of an update of some indicative trigger dates. So first of all, at the top line there, the roadmap stages. You'll see stage 4 and stage 5 have been split into two. So there's a stage 4.1 and a stage 4.2. And that is effectively to allow the contact activity to progress within stage 4. Because as you can see down at the bottom, we won't be progressing to contact activities, modified rugby contact activities at the start of stage 4. So stage 4.1, which at the moment, the earliest trigger date for that is the 24th of August, which will obviously be determined and guided again by Scottish Government. The main kind of update of stage 4 for Return to Rugby will be that adults will be able to play a modified touch rugby format. And that is in line with the youth touch rugby format, which we launched with stage 3. That period will last for a period of time, and then we'll then progress into stage 4.2, which would then allow for modified contact activities. At that stage, we don't have a date for that yet. That's TBC. Obviously, as soon as we are able to kind of project an early trigger date, we'd put that in and update you with that. But 4.2, that was when we'll start to allow ourselves to get into more traditional contact activity. Again, it'll be modified, it'll be restricted, but would involve certain things like 1v1 tackling, for example. So there'll be an opportunity to get back into sort of technique and contact activity within there. Stage 5, as you can see, is also split into two stages, 5.1 and 5.2. And again, that's just to allow that trajectory into contact rugby, where 5.1 will be full contact training, and then 5.2 is when we'll be able to play club v club friendly matches before we eventually get into stage 6 at the moment, which we've got is the 31st of October, where we'll be able to start competitive rugby. So that stage 6 date has been the date that we've been using when we've been looking at the competition structures that I talked about in the previous slide. And that's what we're aiming for at the moment. It is indicative, it will be determined by the government as always. And I think kind of a message for us is that we need to be kind of alive and agile to that. That if it does move, then we have to move competition fixtures to the date that's determined to us by Scottish Government. But that's just a bit of an update and an overview of some key dates and what that might look like when we do transition to stage 4.1, hopefully at the end of this month. Just some further details on that. So return of adult contact rugby, it's important to stress, and I think we talked about this in our last webinar, contact rugby, when the government are talking about contact rugby, isn't probably what we know contact rugby to be. So contact rugby is effectively whenever there's any contact between two humans. So it's not tackle, it's not ruck, it's not scrums or lineouts. So contact rugby does mean that we can progress into that touch rugby that I talked about, which would be in line with the youth game. At that point of stage 4.1, we expect the youth and the adult game to be in parallel and both playing the same sort of versions and have the same restrictions with regards to what can be done on the rugby pitch. And then in terms of gym reopening, again, at the moment, the indicative date we have for gym reopening is the 14th of September. It's important to stress that the guidelines that we'll be producing will apply to all gyms. So I know some rugby clubs have gyms and change rooms, for example, or gyms in other indoor areas. What the guidelines that we will be producing will apply to all indoor gyms. And the conditions and the restrictions will be quite significant for example, there will be some specific conditions with regards to ventilation that all gyms will have to adhere to. Again, much more information on that will be provided, which Jen's working on with regards to the facilities. But again, it's just a bit of an update on where we are with that and where we see that going. At the moment, for your clubs, for your coaches, I know I've been having a few conversations with some clubs over the last couple of days about what type of conditioning can we do. So the guidance that we're saying at the moment is obviously it's all outdoor fitness activity. So you are incorporating conditioning if that's what you want to do in your training sessions out on the pitch, is what you can do at the moment. And then I talked about at the beginning of this webinar, so we wanted to produce some guidance where for clubs and for schools for how to deal with a positive case as it happens within a club. So this has been signed off today by our threat management group, and we will produce some further documentation in this, I think, in the next week or so. Just to give you a bit of an overview of what that looks like, there'll be a number of steps that we'll be asking the club to go through if a positive case does happen within a club, and there'll be steps that we will also take within Scottish Rugby to support the club through that process. So first of all, step one is that the club needs to take the relevant guidance based on local NHS board and what the Test and Protect team's advice is. The first thing that the club must do, that we're saying the club must do within this scenario, is that it must postpone all rugby activities until a full risk assessment has been undertaken, and then appropriate action off the back of that has been taken in line with the local public health guidance. So that's absolutely key there, that we do postpone all rugby activities if a case does happen within a rugby club. And then further to that, we would expect the clubs to notify all members of the club, and then also notify Scottish Rugby. So we're aware that this has happened, that this has arose within the club. It is really unlikely that Scottish Rugby will be notified directly about a case, so we would be expecting the clubs to notify us, so we are aware of it. Step two, internally within Scottish Rugby, we would then nominate a member of staff, so a bit like a case officer, to support the club through the process. And that would most likely be the regional director. And that person would then link directly with the COVID-19 safety coordinator through the process. We would also offer media and medical support if it was required. And then we would then expect the club to assist Test and Protect teams with contact tracing if that was required. And then step three would again expect, and our guidance would be that the club would convene an emergency meeting, which would obviously include the COVID-19 safety coordinator to deal with and track the situation. And then before the club then returned to any kind of activity, we would again expect a full risk assessment to be undertaken and completed. And then that may, for example, may include cleaning of specific club areas. So a bit of a flavour of what that guidance will look like. As I say, we will be producing proper documentation which will sit on our website. We'll also email it directly out to the coordinators as well, so you have that, can digest it. And if it's needed, you can use and follow the guidance that we've produced there. As well as dealing with positive cases within a club, we're also wanting to produce some guidelines around dealing with local lockdowns. So obviously this happened last week, and I think it's fair to say last week the clubs within the area and also Scottish Rugby were all learned through the course of the week and learned fairly quickly. And I think it got to the point where, again, we wanted to produce some guidance that would support us, but also support our clubs if we do get into a situation where we get more local lockdowns. So first of all, the day that Scottish Government were to announce a local lockdown, what would happen within Scottish Rugby is that we would convene an immediate internal meeting with key staff members. And then the impact of the lockdown would effectively then determine the Return to Rugby guidance, which we would start to think about communicating to the clubs within that local authority that's been locked down. Our Scottish Rugby Threat Management Group, which is overseeing all COVID-19 scenarios and pieces of work that are happening, would effectively sign off and agree to what the internal group had proposed, and then we would develop a communication strategy, which we would then start to communicate to all clubs and external stakeholders. We would then look towards the regional director within our regional teams who would also get support from the media team, and we would then look to communicate to all clubs and all external stakeholders within the local area to ensure that the communication strategy and any restrictions that are in place that has been determined by the local lockdown was understood and received by all clubs and by all stakeholders. And then throughout the entire process, supports from Scottish Rugby regional staff would be available to support any clubs through that process. So again, this detail and the detail in the previous slide are two really key pieces of work that we're working on at the moment. It's all been produced, it's actually been signed off today. So I suspect in the next week or so, we will be able to communicate that with you all, and there'll be opportunity for you to digest that and then reach out to regional teams or rugby development if there's any specific questions on it. So we're all prepared if we are to experience either a positive case or a local lockdown. Okie dokes. So that's a wee bit of an update from me with regards to Return to Rugby. As I say, there's nothing really new apart from these two pieces of information, but it's just a good opportunity to reiterate some key messages along the way, which will hopefully help you within your roles. Okay, so the next part of the webinar, I'm just going to bring up Alan. So if you just bear with me for 2 seconds, and Alan's going to take us through for the next few minutes. So if you just bear with me. Hello, Alan. I think your mic's on mute, so if you want to try and unmute your mic.
That better?
That's you there, yeah.
Right.
That's you there. So, Alan, just for me, thanks very much for agreeing to take part in tonight's webinar. Look forward to hearing what you've got to say over the next few minutes. So, without further ado, I'll control the slides, Alan, if you just want to navigate me through it, and over to you.
Okay, right. Thanks very much, and good evening, everyone. It's quite a daunting task to actually try and summarise what we've been doing in 10 minutes, but hopefully this will give you a flavour as a rugby club what we've been doing. I was asked to come in by the rugby club. I was a past secretary of the rugby club, but also before I retired I was a health and safety professional, so they saw the role sitting very nicely in it, my past career. But I must admit, I've never been as busy as what I have been in the last month. What I want to talk you through, what we have done on communication, team leads, checklists to support our risk assessments, benchmarking. It's a small part, but it's an important element. Facilities management and training feedback. I've put communication first because I think it's fundamental to everything we're doing, especially a club the size of Hamilton. And one of the things we've produced is these 3 booklets. And these booklets go into great detail on what is required from the players, coaches, parents. They're about 12 pages long, and they cover things like training dates and times. They cover pre-season sign-up registration, the pre-session checklist, so before they even turn up on the facility, what the players should bring with them. Arrival and during the session, departing ground map, where they should go. We're using 2 pitches for our training sessions. It also contains the SRU guidance, For players, it has the National Health guidance, the facts page, and test and protect guidance. So it's a whole suite of information that everybody that's turning up at our facility needs to know. So, and we've sent that out via our social media to all players, coaches and parents for the youth section. So everyone's got a copy of that before they arrive. We've also produced 3 videos for each age group, and it's actually a walkthrough of the facility, showing them where they will be met at the gate, how they sign in, how their name is recorded, and where they're allocated to go to on the specific pitch. I say communication's a really big thing. Next slide, Steve. And we look.
Sorry, Alan. Sorry, Alan. Just to interrupt you. I'm just going to take it off the presenter mode because
it's jumping ahead of itself.
And yeah. On, so I'll just leave it there if that's okay. Okay, on you go, Alan. Sorry.
Right. All in all, we have 17. We've took a look at the age groups, and the senior teams will get 17 groups that we had to find a team lead for each one. We've now got all the names for the team leads. Happy to say they're all on board. I communicate directly with them through a group email. So they've all got their copy of the main risk assessment that we've completed. They've all got their role profile. They've also got my role profile, so we know where they interact with myself. And we've also set on one of the recommendations of the team leaders on Messenger, we've set up a Q&A session, a Q&A platform, sorry, so is that if they've got any concerns or any questions, they seek clarification, they fire it into the Messenger and I pick it up and get an answer for them. So we're keeping that communication going, because as they progress through the different stages that we're going through and they start to encounter the training, and they're coming up with different issues that maybe I've not thought about, and it's a really good system for getting people quick answers. Right, next slide, Steve. Checklists. This was an interesting one. When I looked at the team role, the team leader's role, the very first thing it said is for every training session they should complete a training risk assessment. Now to me that is quite an onerous task. Some of these people, I know they're not all coaches, and some of them might have never done a risk assessment in their lives before. So what I've prepared for Hamilton is a generic risk assessment that covers all training scenarios for the seniors right down into the youth section. Emanating from that risk assessment is a checklist with all the respective actions that we expect to be conducted on the day prior to the training session, and it's 2-page long. So I give each team lead a checklist, and on the day they complete that checklist. It's just basically a summary of the risk assessment. They'll complete it, sign it off and give it back to myself, and once I get that, I then keep that filed with the original generic assessment I was talking about. So that it's a much more, we're still doing the risk assessment. What the team leads are doing is confirming that that risk assessment actions required are in place by filling in the checklist. So that it's a slight deviation from what the role profile says, but we put it to use last weekend and it's working, and we're getting positive feedback. There's also a section in it at the very end where if there's anything that arises that we haven't anticipated, I've called it exceptional circumstances, they can actually write it in and I can collect them and say, well, that's something that's arising quite often. Let's get that included in the basic risk assessment because it needs address. It's rising, you know, there's an exceptional circumstances coming up too quick. Our first training programme was in the 6th, last Thursday. We were supposed to have one in the Tuesday with the seniors, the ladies and gents training. However, I get feedback from the coach saying my risk assessment was incomplete because it didn't cover training using a snorkel. And I think that was a reflection on the heavy rain we'd had all day. The park was completely flooded. But it shows you the system's working, they are looking at it and they are using it. So that's a positive, I say, and it takes away this onus of having to sit down and prepare a risk assessment for every session. There is one prepared, the checklist confirms it. Right, benchmarking. Probably heard in the news that in North Lanarkshire there was a spike a few weeks ago now, and one of the pubs in Motherwell was visited by the environmental health. I happen to know the general manager, so I contacted him, and just purely for a benchmarking exercise, I asked him, could you share your risk assessment with me, which he did. I've got a copy of it. I says, and you were visited by the environmental health, what areas did they look at? And he says, specifically they looked at what risk assessments, cost assessments, and what the cleaning arrangements were in the bar. Quite a different scenario from our rugby club, where we're not in the main street, we don't have the public just walking in, it's more controlled through members, where this was a situation where anyone could have walked into the pub, so the parameters were quite tight in controlling it. He was delighted to tell me on the day that I asked him that he had actually got confirmation in writing from Environmental Health that there was no further action needed. So I thought it was worth highlighting the fact that if we ever do get a visit in your club from the Environmental Health, risk assessments are paramount, cost assessments are paramount, cleaning arrangements, and all the whole lot supported by how you're communicating, in his case to the staff, in our case it's how we're communicating to our players, coaches, members. So it's a good exercise. The risk assessment, I would say, going in the templates that SRU have issued, and that's what I've based our risk assessment on, much more detailed than what they've produced for the bar. So that gave me a comfort factor that we were probably a step ahead as far as the detail we go into. So just a small exercise, but I thought it was worthwhile mentioning. Next slide. Right, facilities management. This has been the biggest task so far. We've only started training, as I said, last Thursday. The club facility is locked down, it's not open yet. We're planning, the plan is that it will open this Friday. Only in the lounge and bar area, dressing rooms are still out of bounds. Gym is closed. And there's the club is not open during training sessions. So it's this weekend we're planning to open. We did conduct a full deep clean of the whole facility. So every room, gym, dressing room, toilet, lounge area, meeting rooms, the whole place has been sanitised. We brought in a contractor to do it for us, and we were given a certificate and the level of cleanliness. As I said, no access during training sessions. I've highlighted one specific thing that caught us out, and that was the Legionella check. Although we understood that we had to do one, we organised the sampling. Sampling went away, and then we were informed it will take 10 days for that sample to go through the process to be able to tell us that we're clear or we're not clear. Now we got the all clear, but that 10 days knocked us back because we were hoping to have it opened. So that 10 days had to get built into the programme and things were being delayed. Following the deep clean, we've created a new cleaning schedule. And that new cleaning schedule has been introduced. So we've actually taken that on board, and a lot of help from the subcontractor who has been doing the deep clean for us. Again, following the principle of the detailed checklist. The checklist for our facility is actually 11 pages long. It is a very detailed checklist. So you can imagine I think our risk assessment was something like 15 pages long. Sat down yesterday with the committee, and all bar a few items that will be complete this week. We've got a tick in the box for proceeding to open our lounge and bar facility. So fingers crossed that will work. Good. We've got our bar manager and our club manager all trained up, doing the usual checks, people arriving, phoning in to get a booking. We're going to introduce doing the heat test, the temperature check on people as they arrive. And I know it's not a definite requirement, and some people have got some concerns over it, but it's a visible exercise that people say we're taking this serious. Training feedback, overall positive, but we had a few hiccups, and we put them into context with the hiccups because what we're trying to do is change people's habits that they've been doing for years. This is me talking about coaches. You've got a coach who all of a sudden decides to jump onto the training pitch and show them how to do a certain exercise. And the positive was everybody shouted at him to go off the pitch because they all knew he shouldn't have been there. And he held his hands up and said, I forgot. And that's the problem we'll have at the beginning. I said there were only a few wee glitches, but it was all down to people falling into that mode. Here's what I do when I turn up for training. And although he knows that it shouldn't have been on the pitch, it was just a pure instinctive reaction. The positive side was he was told very quickly, get off the pitch. You're going to shut down the whole training session. We have a wee bit concern over the scheduling because we run 2 sessions with a 15-minute gap for cleaning. We're not too sure if that 15 minutes is enough, so we're reviewing that tonight. The seniors are training again tonight, and we'll review that again to see if we should maybe expand that time between one session finishing and the next session starting. And also the scheduling of, as much as you tell people turn up 5 minutes before, they turned up 20 minutes before, which gives you a problem, you know. But again, it's like back to the communication, back to the reminding people, yeah, we're glad to see you. However, it'd be better if you sat in your car and checked in 5 minutes before you're due. Then it stops the passing people passing each other. So I think that was everything I wanted to go through. If anybody wants any information on what we've done, because this isn't all my work, there's a whole team behind me have produced the booklets and that. Steve, you've got my contact. If anybody contacts you, put them on. You can send them my email address, and they can contact me, and we'll see if we can help them out if they want to pick up on anything we've done so far.
Excellent. Really appreciate that, Alan. So I will do that. If somebody contacts, I'll share your email address. And no, that was excellent. So thank you very much. I found it interesting when you're talking about the daily checklist that your coaches and your team leads are doing. And what I really like about that is that you've obviously looked at our guidance and you've thought, okay, well, actually that doesn't quite work for our environment. It needs to be slightly different to work for our environment. And I think that's really positive. And that's what we kind of want to do. We obviously have we produced that daily risk assessment, but ultimately it needs to work for your own coaches and your team leads and yourself as well. So the fact that you've done that, I think, is a real positive. Yeah.
What I was trying to achieve was stay compliant, but with the minimum administration. Mm. And I know sometimes the two things conflict with one another, but if you've got strong communications binding that together, it will work. And I must admit, the team leads have been very proactive because they're coming back to me already. I had one training session. Our minis training is this weekend coming up with their first session. So we'll wait and see how it goes when you're dealing with a younger group. But I say the sheets will come back to me, the checklists come back to me, and I'll collate them. And it's what we learn from that will make it better.
From a practical point of view, Alan, how are you receiving the sheets? Are they emailing them to you, or is it a hard copy?
Both.
You can upload it somewhere? Both.
Yeah, both. Once our development officers, Stephen, he's collecting them for us.
Right.
Because he's at most of the training sessions. Once we get the club lounge function and office open, it'll be easy for them to deposit them there and I can go down and collect them. But I've had some through, the ones I've had this through already have been scanned and emailed to me.
Okay. Okay, no, great.
And I'll keep them as a master copy, you know. So what, if anything, but I keep trying to tell people, you do get a lot of feedback talking about the amount of paperwork. I says, look, in the perfect world, we'll never need to refer to the paperwork. However, if something goes wrong and our system breaks down, you need the paperwork to support what you did in the first place and identify where there's been a gap and we'll let the ball drop. So once you start explaining it to people, then they come more on board with why they need to do it. I've not had any complaints yet from anyone saying this is a waste of time, why am I doing it? They're all on board with it.
Brilliant, brilliant. No, that's great to hear. That's great to hear. So again, Alan, thank you very much from us. It was certainly for me, it was really interesting and really valuable. And I'm sure for everybody listening in as well, it is just really nice to hear practically what it's like on the ground and hear a different voice as well. So thanks for that, for putting that in. And I will, if anybody does contact me, if you're happy, I'll share your email address.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Thanks very much, Alan.
Cheers.
Okay. So just moving on then, so I'm just going to hand over to Jen Griffin now, and Jen's just going to give us a bit of an update on facility reopening guidelines. Over to you, Jen.
Yep, so just a bit of an update as to where we are. There aren't huge changes in terms of what can be open. As we all know, we're still very much within phase 3 of the government guidelines and stage 3 of Scottish Rugby's guidance. So pitches and outdoor catering remains the same. Toilets can be opened, and this is including toilets within a changing room, but the use of the changing room facilities must remain closed. We have had a few questions in the last couple of weeks, so I just wanted to reiterate on this, that changing rooms can be open purely for toilet facilities with all the same processes that you would have on for opening toilets anyway, but the changing room must remain closed in terms of for changing or storing equipment. The management of this can be quite tricky, so it's to stop people congregating as well, because naturally it's a bigger area, people could hang about. But it was just to let you know that if it's easier while you are using the pitches, if it's access for players in and out to use the toilet, and that's the quickest and safest way rather than going in through the clubhouse, then it's absolutely an option. Just follow the exact same process as you would usually do for your toilets. So risk assessment, management, and higher frequency and intensity of cleaning. All of that remains as is. However, indoor catering updates changed, as you will have heard from the update from Scottish Government last week. So collecting customer details for contact tracing is now mandatory. Where possible, individuals should pre-book tables in advance, and you can hear Alan, you heard Alan previously speaking about that for the bar. There's no queuing at the bar or outside of it, so if possible, table app or table service, ordering via an app is absolutely the way to go. And to cut back background noise from music to a TV, and this is to prevent shouting and close contact for people maybe leaning in to hear what someone is saying. So these are all just new updates that have come out, and this was one of the reasons we wanted to bring this information to your attention, is that things will continue to change, be it progress or slightly be pulled back in constraint. So if we just move on, just a recap of the resources that are available on the website. So we do have posters for maintaining physical distance, hygiene, reducing the transmission of COVID. Please feel free to download and use them. It's been great. We have seen loads of pictures on Twitter and Facebook of clubs having them outside on club notice boards, of having them inside the clubhouse. So it's really good to see that they're being used, and please continue to do so. You heard Alan say there that the risk assessment was absolutely paramount and essential, and it is. So we do have examples on the website, and we have a template, a blank template that you can use for your own club, but you can use your own template if you wish. We have again had a lot of questions about, can the examples that we have on the website that are PDF, can those be put into Word documents? The answer, unfortunately, is no. We're really aware that we're not covering everything that will be in every single club, and we may be covering things that won't be in every club. So to avoid any confusion, we're advising that clubs start from scratch but use information from the examples. We've got advice and guidance on outdoor and indoor hospitality there, with regards to setup, introduction into that, and operationally how it may be able to run. We've got the facilities video that we put out a couple of weeks ago, and this was just to give clubs things to consider, really. Again, we appreciate that everyone is at different stages. Some clubs have opened to training, some are only doing hospitality indoor or outdoor just now. So we just wanted to keep that there, to keep it fresh. It's about 4 minutes. If you get the chance, please go and have a look at it. And the last thing is the sharing of good practice. So if you're part of the regional Facebook groups, you'll see that we're starting to encourage clubs to post any good practice that they have done. And we're also sourcing things that we've seen on social media and posting them. Again, this is a real time for us all to share, given that Alan's come on and shared all the resources that he has for Hamilton. It's that's the spirit we want to get into. So if you're not already in the regional Facebook groups, please contact your regional director on how to get into them. It's just a click invite. You go in, register, you answer a couple of questions, and you'll be allowed into the group. And it won't just be sharing good practice of this. There's loads of other things that come up in terms of updates. So if you're not already in, we'd advise that you try and get into that. And if you do have any good practice that you want to share, please feel free to do so, because it's really helpful to all other clubs. So just moving on to some additional information. You'll have seen in the club comms that went out on Friday, Scottish Rugby have advised against holding a physical AGM in clubhouses, and this is in line with Scottish Government guidelines. There is no change currently to business and business meetings. All non-essential offices remain closed. Legal advice has been amended to accommodate having a virtual AGM if it's not within your constitution. There has been an amendment legally to say that it can take place online. Additional information for virtual AGMs can be found within Harper MacLeod documents that sits on the Sport Scotland website. It takes you quite clearly through what is available and how you could do it. I have had a few questions from clubs to say, how is this different from indoor hospitality, where it's down to 1 metre and you can have people in? And it's simply because that exception is there for exclusively indoor hospitality. The AGM relates to business and business meetings, so that's why the difference is there. So for now, Scottish Rugby is advising that you try and hold virtual AGMs where possible. We've had some examples of clubs that have done it and it's gone really well. They've been happy to share that information. So if you are a club who has had a virtual AGM, please feel free to share how you've found it. And just a quick summary of where we've been, where we are. Risk assessments are essential, and that's kind of been reiterated tonight. Changing rooms do remain closed. However, if you need to use them for toilet access, you absolutely can. Indoor facilities, including gyms, remain closed, and hospitality is the exception to that. As Steve alluded to earlier, we are looking to provide guidance on gyms when they do open. We will try and get it out as early as possible, but as you will have seen in the past week, guidance is changing, and the Scottish Government guidelines can change within days. So we don't want to put something out that then becomes out of date. The date of the 14th of September is a kind of not before. It can be pulled forward and it could be pushed back. So again, we don't want to put information out there that's potentially out of date or new guidelines come in on the day that it's announced. So apologies if it's not out as quick as you would like, but we would rather it was correct and promoted the safe use of the gyms, other than we rushed it out and then had to retract and add and amend. So just really want to thank you for your patience with that. As always, high frequency and intensity of cleaning should be maintained. And I'll reiterate again, all clubs are at different stages. Yes, we're putting this advice and guidance out, but it certainly doesn't mean that you have to move at the pace that we're putting it out. you do what's right for your club. And again, Alan highlighted that earlier. Engage with local partners, local authorities and schools. You know, the schools are going back this week. Local authorities, in terms of facilities, it's always better to be proactive. I said before, you might not get an answer straight away, or you might not get the answer you want straight away. Be patient with them, but I think it's always good to engage to see what their guidelines are in terms of using their facilities if you do need to use a local authority or community facility. And just to reiterate, what we're providing in all of these webinars and on our website is advice and guidance, and it's up to yourself and the clubs to take that on and shape it to how it fits your club, but staying within the Scottish Government guidelines. And just finally wanted to highlight, again, what we did last time was the chance of transmission of the virus is significantly higher within indoor spaces, and therefore it's essential that Scottish Government guidance is followed. We have seen advice will change depending on how the virus is acting and where it is and how the transmission is going. If the past couple of weeks are anything to learn by, it's that we certainly cannot be too complacent. So just to highlight that indoor restrictions are much stricter, and the development of open and indoor spaces, certainly for physical activity, will take a bit longer because of the evidence that's coming out about that transmission rate being significantly higher. All right, thanks very much.
Okay, thanks, Jen. That was great. So just some final messages from me just before we finish off. So first of all, just a reminder, we shared a facility tracker form a couple of weeks ago with all safety coordinators. And it's just a reminder or a prompt. If you've not yet filled that in, to do that. If you're not too sure what I'm talking about, just please contact your regional director and we can just share this form, and it just helps us understand what levels of activity are happening around the country. So yeah, just a wee prompt on that. Again, I touched on it earlier on. The e-learning course for players, coaches, match officials and volunteers is still available. So again, it might be worth communicating that with your members if there's still some members within your club to complete that course. Just an update, so Jason Leach is attending the Scottish Rugby podcast this week, so he'll be on that. It'll be out later on this week, and it's probably just a bit of a recommendation to tune into if you have time. They do get uploaded, so you can listen to it any time, and he'll be specifically talking about return to rugby. I do know within that he will be talking about contact sport and contact rugby. So if you have a spare hour, it might be worth just tuning in to hear what Jason has to say on the podcast this week. The FAQs document. So again, there's been some questions coming in this evening, which is great to see. I think we've answered a few of them, but again, any relevant questions that are coming in that's worth sharing on a general FAQs document will get updated. We're also experiencing lots of questions coming in via email to either regional directors or rugby development admins. We're collating all those questions. Please keep them coming. And when they are coming in, we are putting that into the FAQs document, which keeps that refreshed. And at the appropriate time, we'll also share that via email as well, direct to you. So just to keep us all relevant. And then just finally, just continue to thank you for your hard work and your commitment. You're all going the extra mile. We all really appreciate it because it is getting us back to rugby safely, which is the most important thing. So again, thanks for tuning in tonight, and thank you for all your hard work that you're doing within your clubs and your schools. And that's all from us. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll look forward to speaking to you soon. Bye bye.